Well, welcome to the MAM Journals. This is the final one of the first series of 6 that I've been doing, and for the more observant of you who have been kind enough to watch some of the other videos, you'll recall that at the end of the last video I said that I'll be doing the GSXR 750, and clearly I'm not doing a GSXR 750, so I thought I'd better explain. I live in Oxfordshire, and the local Suzuki dealer is King's Two Wheel Centre, and the owner there said to me, I've been watching some of your videos, would you like to have a go on the Hayabusa? I'll see if I can ask Suzuki and whether they'll lend you a bike. And as you can see, they have, so I'm very grateful to both them to enable this to happen. And I look forward to going through and talking to you about this bike, which is the Hayabusa Gen 3, Generation 3 bike. And in keeping with our usual format, I'll be talking about the history of the bike and talking about generations 1, 2, 3, how it's evolved and what this bike is all about. I'll then be talking through some of the technical issues, and that's going to be quite fun because there's a lot of fantastic technology on here. I'm going to try and talk to you in terms of not only what the technology is, but what it does, or what it did for me as a rider, which I think is the really relevant thing about technology. And finally, I'll be talking about what it's actually been like to ride. Right, so let's talk about the history of the bike. Bike manufacturers are competing with one another for who has the fastest bike since time immemorial. And they were ably assisted by their customers, because I certainly remember in the 70s and 80s, the first thing you did when you got a new bike was to find out exactly how fast it went. But clearly, as technology's improved, the speeds at which bikes travel has increased immensely. And in 1990, Kawasaki launched the, make sure I get this right, the ZX11. That was a 176 mile an hour bike. Honda responded in 1996 with a CBR 1100 XS Blackbird, which I think, or it's certainly been alleged, was derived its name from the Lockheed SR-71, which is a pretty fast plane at the time. If anybody wants to look on the internet, find out about that. And that did 180 miles an hour. Now, Suzuki responded with a Generation 1 Hayabusa in 1999, and the bike was tested at 194 miles an hour. That is a projectile. Now, legislators were getting concerned about this, and they quietly had a word with manufacturers and said, guys, you need to be careful here, because you're producing bikes that travel at speed which we're really not being comfortable with them being released for the road. So either you sort it out, or we'll sort it out. We might even possibly ban the importation of these. So the bike manufacturers got together and formed a gentleman's agreement. It's not legally binding, but an understanding. And the details of that, to the best of my knowledge, have never been published. But certainly it was interesting that Honda said fairly shortly after that they wouldn't be producing any road bikes that did more than 300 kilometers per hour. Now that, in old money, is 186 miles per hour. That's quite an important number when you look at the performance figures of these super bikes. So, having launched the Gen 1, they evolved the bike into the Generation 2, and they launched that in 2008. And in 2013, they put on an ABS system, which I've got to say, certainly from my perspective, would have been a big addition. I'm sure other riders may have different experiences, but I quite like the idea that something stops as well as it goes, but each to their own. And they launched that bike, and again, it did 186 miles an hour. I thought that at the end of 2018, with Euro 4 coming in, they stopped producing the bikes because they weren't going to be saleable in Europe in 2019, although they could have still sold them in America. I thought they were going to drop it from the range, and they did, but I thought that was the end. That was the end of the history of the Hayabusa, which was a bit of a sad day, really. But I was delighted when I saw that they'd launched the Gen 3 bike, which complies with Euro 5, and amazingly enough, does 186 miles an hour. So let's do a technical walk around and see if I can add some insight into what they've done with this Generation 3. Right, let's have a look round the bike. I got it pretty grubby over the weekend, so I was washing it yesterday afternoon in preparation for filming today. And I pushed it into the garage and my 90-year-old father came down and stood in front of it for a little while. I thought, well, I'll just wait and see what he says. And after a moment he said, "Cool, blimey, that looks like a racing rocket." And it's hard not to disagree. It looks like it's doing 150 miles an hour stood still. And it's got those very distinctive Hayabusa lines from previous generations. So it's managed to update while retaining its heritage, which is always, I think, a nice thing. Whilst we're doing sort of a walk around, technical features on it, Gen 1 had a 1298cc and produced 176 brake horsepower. This Gen 3 is a 1340cc engine, the same as the Gen 2 in fairness, but this one produces 187 and does, according to Motorcycle News, 186 miles an hour, which is not surprising based on our discussion of the history. For those of you interested in weight, the bike weighs 582 pounds, but it doesn't feel like it weighs 582 pounds when you actually ride it, which is a credit to the design of the bike. And actually it's got quite a sensible seat height. I'm 5'7", and it's got a seat height where I can get my both feet on the floor and you can sort of paddle it around quite comfortably. I've got slightly lighter bikes here in the garages. It's slightly more difficult to manoeuvre than this one actually is, which is quite encouraging. Going to the front of the bike, you can see I didn't ride it at night. I got quite cold enough during the day, thank you. So I've got no idea or opinion on how effective those LEDs are, but I'm sure that they will be. The more observant of you will notice that it's got slightly bigger intakes than the previous generations. And interesting, reading the performance figures, they're saying that they've increased the mid-range power and its deliverability, which may well be why they've done that, but they will know best. The brakes, it's got Brembos and ABS. They were first introduced in Gen 2 in the second phase of Gen 2 in 2013, and I have to say they're a very welcome addition in my view. Exhausts, clearly one of the things we've all noticed, and the sort of elephant in the room, is these exhausts get bigger and bigger as they comply with various emissions legislation, which is a necessary thing. So, but the consequences are that the aesthetics are not quite what they were in that regard. Interestingly, on this bike, in the differential from the Gen 2, the catalytic converter apparatus was all in underneath the cowl there at the front, but here they've got part of it in the front there, and part of it they've got collectors in the back of these cans, which I actually think looks striking from the rear. Certainly to my eye that does look purposeful. You can actually get smaller cans, or mufflers as they call them in the brochure, and I'll pop a photo on and show you what Suzuki offer as an alternative. So getting to the heart of the electronics, I want to try and not make it too complicated, but there are essentially 4 units lurking under here that are the brains of the operation. At this end, underneath there, is an ABS control unit, which not only affects the ABS braking, it's also used to assist with the hill start technology, which the bike is fitted with, and downhill rear wheel control, which is quite an interesting feature. Lurking under there is an inertial measurement unit, which has a 6-axis IMU. It's a Bosch unit, and it's basically measuring the position of the bike, pitch, roll and yaw, for those of you that are into such things. And that's passing information, communicating it to the engine control module, which is somewhere lurking under there, which is a 32-bit ECM, and it really, combined with the control air network, so a CAN bus as it's called, which is allowing all those units to communicate, enables the bike to know where it is and what it's doing, and in a way that it can then deploy the technology
to help you. But let's talk round, go round and look at the front, and I'll show you how that ties in with the dash. So let's talk about what it actually, that technology is actually controlling and what it's giving you. I was slightly apprehensive about picking up a bike with so much technology on it. I have got bikes with technology on it, but I'm always nervous that you end up endlessly scrolling through screens without actually quite know where you're going. But I've got to say, this is a lot more intuitive than I thought it would be, and once you've got your head around what you're actually messing about with, which didn't take me very long, it's fairly straightforward. So if you're looking, it gives you 3 preset modes. So you've got an A, B or C, and then you've got the options of individualizing them, another 3 on top of that, as well as infinite adjustment around each of those. So if I just show you A, and if you look down, it says PW, that's the amount of power that it's giving you, what power mode it's in. So 1 is the fiercest, and 3 is the least aggressive. Traction control, you've got up to 10 traction control limits, so you can have anything from 10, which is maximum interference, to 1, which is less. You can actually turn it off if you want. Those wanting the pure Hayabusa experience, you can still get it on this bike. You just have control over what you have. And as you can see, as I just press the top there, it just scrolls round back to A, and then you can see that's one of the individual options. You can have a U2. They have got preset sort of numbers in them, but you can alter those to suit your own preferences once you get used to the bike. The C is the softest mode. It's got the softest amount of power coming in and full traction control. And B is a halfway house. I spent most of my time on B. I did actually start off on C because it was pouring down in the rain, but I've ridden a bike for 40 years and it didn't take me very long to think, I can cope with this and put it up into the extra power. Still got to be careful. You've got all this technology, but you still have to ride it, and you certainly have to treat it with respect. But I have to say, it's very impressive and very easy to use. So you've got power modes, you've got traction modes, you've also got how much frankly wheelies control you want to do. You can either put it full on so that it'd be virtually impossible to get it more than a couple of inches off the ground, but if you're a traditional Hayabusa owner and really like pure power, then just turn it off and do what some of the motorcycle and journalist testing these are doing 140-mile-an-hour wheelies down an airfield. So what I like about it is that level of control. You've also got 3 modes. That EB that you can see there, that's about engine braking. You've got 3 modes on that as well. So you decide how much engine braking you want. I've turned it off. I'm fine with it, but I did actually try it a couple of times and I thought, that's clever technology. It makes the bike easier to ride. You feel you've got more control over what's actually going on, and it's got less chance of catching you out unawares by having that sheer amount of power. Other things I should bring to your attention is obviously down there, gear change. It's got quick shifter up and down, and we've all known quick shifter. It's not this isn't the only bike I've got with a quick shifter. I've actually got, I'll just show you over there, I've got one of those. That's got a great quick shifter on as well, but that's more track orientated in terms of what it's trying to do, and we all know how fast you can get a bike to go with a quick change. It certainly helps on that, but what I like about this one is it's got all of that, because it's got 3 modes. You can have it off if you don't want it. You can have a gentle mode on there, which is what I call more road riding assistance, and then you've got the full-on race mode quick change, and it's up and down. Very good. I struggled a bit, which I'll touch on later, with first gear, but I think that's to do with the age of relative newness of the bike. The bike's only done 210 miles, so clearly that sometimes takes a little bit of running in, but it was fabulous on the road and in some very tricky conditions. I thought it was a real riding aid that made this bike a pleasure to ride. So essentially, the bike is about technology. A fantastic dash. The generator, just standing back from it, and the generations, they 1s and 2s. People who've had Hayabusas will know that looks like dash with a traditional Hayabusa dash, but with the addition of that central display unit, which is really easy to read. One thing that caught me out, of course, is a lot of my speedos, the 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock position is not 100 mile an hour, and this bike covers ground remarkably quickly and easily. You've got to keep your eye on it. And another feature they've put on it, of course, is a limiter as well as a cruise control down there. So you can set a limit, which I think if you're pressing along on motorways, it wouldn't be a bad idea to have a warning device to tell you, because you can look down and find out that you're going a lot faster than you thought you were, because the bike rides 20 or 30 miles an hour faster than you might feel it from other bikes that you've ridden. It's effortless, absolutely effortless. Looking at going around mirrors, I wondered whether these would actually be any good, but I have to say, after I'd fiddled about for a little while and adjusted them, I was actually very impressed with the rear vision, because you do a fair amount of overtaking, so it's nice to be able to see behind you. Not that much will be catching you, to be honest, but useful in theory. So, what do I think of the bike? Technical features of the bike? I think it's got a lot of very good technology on it, and it's actually very easy to use. And I think if you had this for a few months, you'd work out how all those systems work, and you'd be playing away to your heart's content and really personalising how you wanted that bike, so you can change it to the conditions and the way you want to ride. I think this is a bike that actually would help you ride well. Some of the bikes I've got, they teach you the hard way if you don't quite get to grips with them. But this is a very, very forgiving bike to ride. Right, let's do some personal reflections. Right, so let's talk about personal reflections and opinions. I'll try in the earlier stages, in the history and the technology, I'll try to be very factual about things. But when it's personal reflections, they are just that. They're my views, and I have full respect that people have other ones. I'm at the stage of my motorcycling where I've got a few bikes, and I occasionally just want to potter around, to be honest. But other times I'm still not totally cured. You'd think by my age I would be. I still actually do like performance bikes, and I do have sports bikes, and I like them, but they don't like me very much. In so much as I do feel, after I've had a couple of hours on a sports bike, I've been sort of had a couple of rounds in a boxing ring, because to ride proper full-on track bikes properly, you've got to commit. They like to be ridden fast, and they like you to move around on the bike and really maximise them. And I like to do that, but what I liked about this bike was it's got all the performance I would ever need, and a bit, but it's also incredibly easy to ride. I've been very lucky in life, and I've had the opportunity to ride and drive some amazing machines, and every now and again you get something and you're on it or in it, and you just laugh. You can't help it. It just makes, and this is one of those machines. This is a hilariously fast bike and fantastic performance. But what I also loved about it was the fact you could do 30 mile an hour in third gear at 2,000 revs, driving in through a town, and it was absolutely comfortable. Some of the other bikes that I've got, for example, you can see behind me here, I've got a 996R. At 30 mile an hour, you will be cooking yourself from the engine heat. An SP1 over this, a 20-year-old technology now, and that will be giving you multiple strains on your clutch fingers as you try and overcome the engine management. But this is just silky smooth. And that's what I think is so special about the bike. The versatility and the technology hasn't impaired any of the performance in any shape or form. You can still be as crazy as you ever wanted to be, and you thought fit and safe, but you can ride it. And it's a very smooth, easy bike to ride. So I have to say I've been really impressed. I rode this in shocking conditions, and I won't talk about speeds, it'd be inappropriate, but this is the fastest bike that I've ever ridden in the rain, and felt secure doing so.
and that's really a tribute to the technology and the power that they put into these bikes. So I try, most of the bikes that I've done reviews on, they're my bikes, so naturally I like them, otherwise they wouldn't be in the garage. So this is a slightly different bike. This isn't my bike, so was there anything that I didn't like? Well, to be fair, there were probably three things. I touched on one earlier. The changing from cold, putting it into first, I found occasionally it took a little bit of jiggling around with, but I do think that's probably because it's a brand new bike and the gearbox will need some wearing in. Secondly, this is a bike that you will feel comfortable riding in all sorts of conditions, and heated grips would have been a real benefit. I certainly wouldn't buy one of these without heated grips, because I know I will be riding it in the rain, because I'll be confident doing so. And I personally prefer to keep the dexterity of quite thin gloves, but I like warm hands. You can of course plug things into various things, but just stick them on the bike and do it. And the third thing that I don't like about this bike is, sadly, I've got to hand it back. I hope you've enjoyed the video. I'm going to be doing another series of 6 videos on various bikes, and I hope that some of you are kind enough to tune in and watch those. Thank you very much for your time.